Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome all to the finale of my Gamera franchise review. Thank you to all those who have watched and listened to me ramble on about a franchise that's mostly bad, even though it has some really good points. I've certainly had a blast doing this, and it's not nearly as draining I don't know. In some ways, it's not nearly as draining as the Godzilla series, but also in others, it's a lot more draining. But thankfully, we do, like with Godzilla, end the franchise on a good note. Um, However, unlike Godzilla, which is still continuing this franchise, and KPF, if you're wondering why I haven't taken my time with these reviews, that's because I was planning to just do Gamera 3 today, and then do Gamera or this movie next Tuesday. But today my schedule changed at work, and I won't have a day off until Thursday. Not to go into all the details, but we had an employee leave and not come back halfway through his shift, and so we're kind of scrambling to get some coverage, and they rely on me a lot at my job, so I have other responsibilities outside of my YouTube channel. So, and I do want to get another franchise review out of the way before I start the Halloween series review next month, which, spoiler, that's my big review series in October. So yeah, that's why I decided to just kind of try to get through this franchise as fast as I could. When is your series ranking coming out? Oh shit, I forgot about that. So I guess my series ranking will I don't know, I'll figure that out at the end of this video. But anyway, that's off topic. But we're not quite done with the Gamera series just yet. We have one more movie in the franchise to talk about, and for a long time, not many people talked about this movie. And even still to this day, this movie is just kind of treated like it's just there in the kaiju fan base. I've never heard anybody come out right out and just say that they absolutely hate this movie. But I've never heard anybody else come out and say that's one of their favorite kaiju movies of all time. Excuse me. And I've never understood why, because I think today's movie is pretty underrated. So with that being said, today I will be reviewing the 12th and, for the moment, final installment in the Gamera franchise with 2006's reboot Soul Millennium film in the Gamera franchise, Gamera the Brave. Like I said, released in 2006. So Gamera the Brave is a bit of an interesting movie because it has a very, very particular origin for what it was originally supposed to be. So Gamera is currently owned to this day by Kadokawa Pictures, which is one of the big four Japanese studios in Japan. Those big four being Kadokawa, Shochiku, Toei, and of course Toho. So actually, hang on. And after the Heisei Gamera trilogy, sometime after the Heisei Gamera trilogy, Kadokawa pretty much bought all the rights to Gamera and the Daimajin series from Dai, and just morphed Dai into their own thing. And now to this day, they are the sole owners, or almost the sole owners, of the Gamera franchise. And by the way, anybody who calls Kadokawa Kadowaka, you're a fucking idiot. That's not how you pronounce it. It's spelled Kadokawa. Kadokawa, not Kadowaka. That's just something I want to say. So anyway. So yes, Gamera is owned by Kadokawa to this day. And they have produced new versions of both Gamera the Brave and Daimajin. Of course, or Gamera the Brave. Of new versions of Gamera and Daimajin. Of course, in 2006, we got Gamera the Brave. And I can't remember what year this was. But Kadokawa also produced a new... Okay, here it is. In 2010, Kadokawa produced Daimajin Kenon, which is a 26-episode TV series, which is essentially it's a retelling of the original Daimajin movie. However, instead of being set in feudal Japan, it's shown in a modern Japanese setting. I actually have seen a few episodes of the show when it was on YouTube for a short time. And it was kind of interesting, but it wasn't like amazing or anything. So, but since then, Kadokawa and Daimajin have just been kind of Kadokawa and Daimajin. Goddamn, Gamera and Daimajin have just been kind of sitting in limbo. Sure, there was that like 3-minute long anniversary trailer that they made for a new Gamera movie made back in 2015, which pissed off a lot of people when it was revealed it was just a trailer, myself included. I do want to see a 13th, 15th, 16th, and 17th Gamera movie, damn it. And also, I am aware that there is the unofficial 4th Gamera film, which is a fan film called Gamera 4 Truth, which picks up the story where Gamera 3 left off. However, Kadokawa is keeping that tightly under wraps for some fucking reason. Because I guess they're just like Paramount, where they hate good fan films. So anyway, with Gamera the Brave, it has an interesting production history for one sole reason. In 2005, Kadokawa pitched an idea to none other than Toho. For Gamera's 40th anniversary, Kadokawa wanted to team up with Toho and finally give the entire world Godzilla vs. Gamera on the big screen. And Toho said no. Toho said no. For the reason why is kind of not really confirmed as to why. There's theories, of course, though I think the general one is that Godzilla Final Wars bombed at the box office, unfortunately, and it was a movie that Toho spent a lot of money on, and it didn't do too well. So Toho wanted to have Godzilla just kind of sit there and simmer for a while, which, of course, they did it for a decade to the exact year, because, of course, 2014 gave us Godzilla 2014. So in that aspect, I can kind of, I can understand why Toho said no, but there's another part of me that said, you guys are idiots, because you can almost guarantee that Godzilla vs. Gamera would have been a gigantic success. People have been wanting to see Godzilla vs. Gamera, an actual legit Godzilla vs. Gamera movie, for years, practically since Gamera's inception back in 1965. Though thankfully we do have the spectacularly awesome Death Battle Godzilla vs. Gamera video. But to this day, yeah, we've never gotten a Godzilla vs. Gamera movie. And we almost did in 2005, but Toho shot Kadokawa down, and to my knowledge, there hasn't been any other plans to make that movie into an actual thing since. I mean, hell, Gamera's been sitting in limbo since 2006, and it kind of just seems like, well, I'll get to that in just a minute. So yes, Gamera the Brave was made instead of Godzilla vs. Gamera, and Some have said, from the few reviews of this movie that I have seen, some have said that there still are elements of Godzilla versus Gamera in Gamera the Brave. I have to politely disagree. I really don't think there's any elements of Godzilla versus Gamera in this movie, except maybe in the antagonistic monster's design. But I actually think those are just more homages than elements of a previous script being with the studio not trying to waste them. So yeah, it's a damn shame that Godzilla versus Gamera never happened, because of course that would have been fucking spectacular. But again, I still say we have the death battle video, and that's good enough for me. It plays out exactly how a fight between Godzilla and Gamera would work out anyway. Sure, Gamera would put up a decent fight, but in the end, Godzilla would whip his fucking ass, and to quote Boomstick, would make Gamera into turtle soup. And also, Gamera the Brave is an interesting movie for me on a personal level, too. Of course, with, again, like I've said about a lot of Gamera movies, with reading about the Gamera movies on Wikipedia, Gamera the Brave always kind of stuck out to me in a bit of a, both a positive and a negative way, because it sounded like a really intriguing film when I'd read about the plot. But it also sounded, to me, for a long time, it sounded kind of like it was a bit of a disappointment, because at that time I was still very intrigued in the Heisei Gamera series. I still hadn't seen them, but they sounded really good to me at the time. And then when I would come off of Gamera 3, I would read about Gamera the Brave, and that just kind of sounded like it was a big letdown. So I was very interested in seeing this movie for a very long time. However, the thing was, for a very long time, Gamera the Brave was made almost completely unavailable to the general public for a very long time. Very, very, very long time. And so I always just kind of assumed, well, Gamera the Brave, I guess, is just one of those monster movies I'll never see. Because even back then, I did not trust torrents. I still don't to this day. So I just said to myself, you know what, I'm never going to see Gamera the Brave, so I may as well just not think about it. It's out of sight and out of mind. I'm not going to worry myself too much about it. But then it wasn't until Bill's episode of Gamera Palooza on Gamera the Brave where my interest in the film re-peaked, and I started getting curious. Okay, has there been any progress on releasing Gamera the Brave legitimately in the States? And a few years later, lo and behold, I found out, yeah, there's the Media Blasters DVD. And thankfully, it wasn't that expensive. I mean, this cost me $25. So this, by default, makes it the most expensive Gamera movie I've ever bought. I bought the original Heisei Gamera Blu-ray trilogy for $10 a piece, so that's like $3 and some change for each movie. I bought the Gamera Legacy Collection for $18. So do the math, that's about $1 and some change each movie. And then I bought the 4-pack Blu-ray sets, which were $10 a piece. And then, of course, once again, the Blu-ray trilogy again. So that was about $2 a piece for those two Blu-rays, because 8 movies. Wait, no. Was it? Hang on a second. What? Someone post in the comments down below. What's 8 divided by 20? Or 20 divided by 8, excuse me. I'm not sure, but... So yeah, this technically is the most expensive Gamera movie I've ever bought. And if you remember back in my Amazon unboxing that I did when I got this in the mail, you may remember me saying that from the reviews that I've seen, I'm not really going to like this movie. Boy, was I wrong. Boy, oh boy, was I wrong. This movie, to be 100% honest, was a massive, pleasant surprise. Granted, I did go into this with no expectations. I didn't know if it was, I mean, I didn't I wasn't hoping for this to be bad, which I don't do that with any movie, but I wasn't expecting it to be bad, but I also wasn't exactly expecting it to be good. And I came out of the movie very, very, very pleasantly surprised. Uh, and now I'm just gonna say it. This spoils my ranking video. This is my fourth favorite Gamera movie. I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think it's an underrated Gamera movie. I think it's an underrated kaiju movie in general. It's not a perfect kaiju movie, don't get me wrong, but I really like this movie. And if I could, once again, I would redo my top 20 favorite kaiju movies. I'd put this on there. It'd be pretty low. It'd be in like it'd probably be like 20 or 19. But I really like this. I thought it was a big, pleasant surprise. And I have quite a few good things to say about this movie. So, with that being said, let's get into the plot of Gamera the Brave. This one's going to be kind of short, but I'm still going to try to make it a little more in depth because despite this movie still being somewhat readily available, I mean, I look at it now and on Amazon, this Media Blasters DVD, it says it's like 15 or 20 left in stock, but says more on the way. But even so, I'm sure a lot more people nowadays have seen this movie, but I'm also still pretty sure that a lot of people still have not seen this movie. So I'm going to try to make this is going to be a very spoiler heavy review, which all my reviews are spoiler heavy, but still I can guarantee there's a lot of people who haven't seen Gamera the Brave. So I'm going to try to make this a little more in depth. Keyword is try. Because as far as story goes, well, it's a good story. There's not really much to say about this movie story because it's pretty simple. So the film begins in 1973, and if you kind of stretch your imagination a little bit, you could say that this movie takes place after Gamera versus Zetus, or not Zetus. That's what this movie is. Gamera versus Zigra. Excuse me. They both start with Z, and they're both kind of similar names. So pardon me. So yeah, in 1973, Gamera is having a fight with three Gauss. The Gauss look pretty similar to the Heisei design. So I guess you could say this movie is kind of like a hybridization of the Showa tone and the Showa storyline with the Heisei designs and the Heisei effects. But yeah, Gamera is fighting three Gauss, and the fight ends pretty badly with one of the Gauss knocking down Gamera. He kills one Gauss with one blast of his fireball. That they're keeping that from the Heisei series too. Gamera is still using fireballs, and the Gauss start to chew and tear Gamera to pieces. So once they fly off, Gamera then decides to self-destruct in order to save a nearby village. So Gamera self-destructs, kills himself, and destroys the three Gauss, and thus ending the kaiju threat. Then the rest of the movie takes place 33 years later in 2006, when the son of one of the survivors of the 73 incident are visiting the grave of the man's wife. His name is Kosuke, and his son Toru are visiting the grave of Toru's mother, who apparently died in a car accident not too long before the events of the movie. And I was calling Mr. Aizawa because I don't know how to pronounce his first name. Mr. Aizawa tries to get Toru to do a traditional prayer for his mother's grave, but Toru seems pretty bitter about it and just says, my mother's not up there, she's down here. And it's very clear that he's taking his mother's death very, very, very hard, which he's taking it a lot easier than I would. But Anyway, so not long after this, when Toru is out playing with his friends, enjoying his first summer without his mom, well, not enjoying, but he's enjoying he's trying his best to enjoy his summer because he is still a kid. He spots in the distance on an island, which actually right next to where Gamera self-destructed back in '73. When Gamera self-destructed, it didn't just destroy the Gauss; it like destroyed a small part of the peninsula. So there's one piece of the landscape that goes out into the sea. Then there's just nothing. This is where Gamera self-destructed, and then right here there's like a very small rock. This is the true end of the peninsula. So this empty space right here between the land and this rock, that's where Gamera self-destructed. So on this little rock here, is where Toru sees a flashing red light. And he swims out there and he finds a glowing red rock with a egg on top of it. And then, of course, from this egg, a baby turtle hatches. And Toru decides to take the turtle home, hiding it from his dad because apparently Mr. Aizawa is a pet hater and doesn't allow turtles inside his home. Because I guess the Gamera series likes to have parents be pet haters. Another thing taken from the Showa series. So Toru then quickly realizes this is not a normal turtle, as it can hover in the air and also breathe fire. And throughout a lot of shenanigans throughout the home for a few days, it turns out this turtle grows in size, like doubles his size daily. Like one scene, he's about as big as my hand. Then the next day, he's as big as my two hands. Then the next day, he's 4 times this size. Like he's big enough so I can hold him in both of my arms. Here's the end of his shell, and here's the other half of his shell. So he's growing in size very, very, very quickly. So he is relocated by Toru and 3 of his friends to maintain secrecy from his father, and then the turtle disappears. And while all this is going on, there are many shipping disasters occurring throughout the area, and the cause of which turns out to be the giant kaiju known as Zetus. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Which soon thereafter goes on a rampage throughout the city. And during its rampage, it corners Toru and his friends. However, the turtle shows up, being about 8 meters tall, and rams into Zetus, intercedes and keeps Zetus away from eating his friend. This, of course, being Gamera. The young Gamera tries to put up a decent fight. However, he, of course, is wounded by the much larger monster. Zetus is about 40 or 50 meters tall in this. I think it's about 50 meters. 50 meters tall, whereas Gamera, he's still a baby. He's like, it's the height difference is like here. But Gamera still tries to put up the best fight he can. And while unveiling Zetus's only special technique, which is a long, sharp, extendable tongue, and he gives Gamera quite the whip, the tongue lashing. Gamera grabs onto his tongue, and as he's going up, breathes fire into Zetus's face and knocks him into the sea. For the moment, incapacitating him. So Gamera is, of course, wounded in this fight and is captured by government officials who see him, of course, as the new Gamera, and they hook up the creature to a machine which infuses it with some kind of red liquid derived from mysterious, what they call scarlet rubies, or scarlet something. Scarlet pearls, I'll just say. Derived from mysterious scarlet pearls found in the vicinity of the egg, which the scientists theorize is what gave various Gamera specimens their power. And they're also harvested from the area from where the first Gamera back in '73 self-destructed. And they start to infuse Gamera with this red liquid. He's not really growing in size, and his condition isn't really changing. But soon after this, Zetus attacks once again, seemingly a little bigger. And the new Gamera, now being about 45 meters tall, somehow he's growing larger again, goes out to battle him. And the human characters determine that Gamera is still not completely grown, and he must consume the red stone, which Toru had found Gamera's egg with, in order to gain his full power. And through a very long montage of various kids placing it into other kids to get it to Toru, Toru finally gets his hands on this stone. And when Gamera is thrown into a building by Zetus, as he falls out, Toru throws it into Gamera's mouth, and Gamera's power of jet-propelled flight manifests, and he defeats Zetus by tearing off Zetus's tongue and then charging up a supernova fireball attack, and hits Zetus right in the face, and Zetus blows the fuck up. So the day is saved. The monster escapes further government investigation with Toru's assistance, and Gamera flies off as the boy wishes him farewell, leading into a possible sequel that never came to fruition because to this day, Gamera is still sitting in limbo. So how about this story? I actually really like it. I think this story is very well thought out, even as simple as it is. And this is not like, this does feel very Showa-esque, where the story is a lot simpler and it's a lot more focused on kids. But I would not call this a kids movie. This is more like a family film, which has some surprisingly gory moments for a family movie. But that's just because Gamera is Gamera. So I actually really do like this story. It's essentially about a boy and his big pet. That does sound like Free Willy, doesn't it? To quote Bill, I actually do agree. That does really sound like Free Willy. But yeah, I really do like this story. There is one problem with it, though, and it's that, yeah, as a monster story, this movie is kind of weak. I don't think it's as weak as Bill makes it out to be in his review, but it's definitely more of a human story, with the kaiju story just kind of taking a back seat to it. So that's, for some people that may be a big problem. For others, they may not really mind it. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. Part of me thinks it's a bit of a problem, but also a part of me thinks, well, this movie's trying something a little different, and I actually do like this movie because of that. But I still do agree that the monster story could have used just a little bit more of a focus in this. But thankfully, unlike other kaiju movies where they're focusing on the human characters and the kaiju story is the backdrop, this movie does something that those movies get wrong. The human story ends up being not very interesting and not very engaging, and just kind of feels you wanting more out of the monster story. Thankfully, with this movie, the human story presented here is engaging and it is entertaining to watch, because not only is it a movie about a boy and his big pet, but it's also about a boy reconnecting with his father, who he had grown distant from because of the loss of his one of his other parent, which a lot of parents and children who lost a parent or both parents can probably relate to. And it's very well executed. For some reason, also, it does kind of bring to mind Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, which will probably be the only time Gamera the Brave and Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window will ever be mentioned in the same sentence. And I'm not saying like these movies are similar, only in the sense that it's similar because Toru, over the course of a big event, reconnects with his father. Jimmy Stewart's character in Alfred Hitchcock's Rear Window, over the course of a big event, reconnects and settles his differences with his beautiful girlfriend. So do you see why I bring up those two? It does come to mind. Though, of course, this being a monster movie and with Rear Window being a suspense thriller, they still are very different, but they still, for me at least, they still do come to mind. So, with the plot out of the way, let's get into the pros and cons of Gamera the Brave. Pro number one is that the cast of characters here, they're very good. Very, very, very good. This is the first and only Gamera movie ever made where I can legitimately say the child actors are good. Even as I say it, I still can't believe I'm saying it. Did I seriously just say child characters in a Gamera movie are good? Wow. It's a miracle, isn't it? But the child characters, specifically Toru, he is the main one. His friends are also well acted in their dialogue. They're kids. But they're not annoying kids. They're just kids. The same goes with Toru. Though I kind of feel like Toru is a bit of an old soul, where he seems like he's very mature for his age. I don't exactly know how old he is. He's probably like 10, or at earliest 10, and at latest maybe 12. But I think he's 10 years old in this movie. But he does seem very mature for a 10-year-old, which I do like. He's not annoying. Well, the only thing about him that's a little annoying for me personally is that he just seems to be intentionally defiant against Toto, as he names. I just call him Gamera, as Gamera being Gamera. Like multiple times in this movie, he says, "No, he's not Gamera. He's not Gamera. He's not a giant monster. He's Toto. He's just Toto. He's not Gamera." I'm just like, kid, are you stupid? He's a giant turtle that breathes fire and flies. Gamera is a giant turtle that breathes fire and flies. Toto is that exact same thing. Are you stupid? Though some will say, well, he just doesn't want to accept that his friend may commit suicide. Which, that's another thing that I don't like about him, is like he seems like convinced that Toto will end up committing suicide just like his predecessor did, which I kind of call bullshit, because A, how would he know that's what his predecessor did? And also B, not every monster is just gonna say, "Oh, God, self-destruct." At some point at the exact same time, which I thought was a little stupid. But outside of that, Toru is very well acted. His dialogue is pretty good. He doesn't act annoying. He does act like a kid, but he acts like an average kid, a kid who's trying to have fun despite his circumstances, trying to live a happy life, again, despite his circumstances. And he's just trying to be a kid, trying to be a normal kid. And he's enjoyable. The actor who plays Mr. Aizawa, Kanji Suda, he also does a very, very, very good job as Toru's father. I totally buy him as being this actual actor's father. He clearly loves his son, but it's also very obvious that he and his son don't really have that much in common, which kind of reminds me of my relationship with my father. It's my relationship with my own father has always been a little strained because he and I we look similar, but our interests are so drastically different that it's difficult. It's always been difficult for me to like have a really long and in-depth conversation with my father without it turning into just awkward silence. It's actually very frustrating for me, and I feel like that's the kind of thing that Toru has with his own father. So I guess I can personally relate to that. And yes, Omega Picture, unlike the kid from the first Gamera movie, but still, um, I do buy their relationship. And in the end, it is pretty heartwarming to see Toru and his father, settle their differences and finally reconnect. Um, so overall, this is one of the best father-son relationships ever done in a monster movie. I don't think there's that many done, but of the few, this might be the best. I can't really think of any others off the top of my head, but good job, Kodoko. Well, you did good. So the cast overall is very, very, very solid. The rest of the supporting characters, once again, they're not annoying. They're well acted, they're well written, and overall, this movie has a very good cast. Pro number two, I like the tone of this movie. Again, it's kind of like a mix of the Showa series and the Heisei series, though I definitely feel like the tone of this movie is a lot more Showa-esque. I mean, it still is fairly dark, or not really dark per se, but it's more, I definitely say it's more serious. It's kind of like a bit of a lesser version of the tone from Guardian of the Universe. It's like a mix of Guardian with a little bit of the first Gamera movie and Gamera versus Gauss. It's not too dark, but it's also not too campy either. It's a perfect mix of being a lighthearted film and being a bit more of a dark film. And I say dark because you actually do see Zetus chomp down on a whole bunch of people. And there's one scene where you don't see Zetus, but it's a ship was attacked, and you see a dude get sucked down by an unknown force in the water. And then there's this big plume of blood that just erupts to the ocean surface. I'm like, oh my god! And this is supposed to be a family movie. So this movie has its gory moments for a family movie, but overall, it's a very good mix of the light and the dark, and which I think is great because any camp can sit down and watch this movie and enjoy it. For those who like the darker stuff, there's things in this that they can like, and for those who like the lighter stuff, there's things here that they can like, which is always great. Pro number three is that this movie is paced very well. It's, in my opinion, it's very cinematically paced. And of the entire 12 movie span of the Gamera franchise, I think this movie is where they get the pacing perfect. There's no scene that drags. There's no scene that goes by way too quick. Well, yeah, there's no scene that goes by way too quick. The pacing is perfect. The film keeps you engaged throughout the entire movie. And that's what a movie should do. It shouldn't, if it's bad, it either A, it drags and makes you notice, okay, this scene's taking way too long, or B, it's too fast where it's at where you think that was way too quick. So yeah, I think this movie is paced very, very, very well. Pro number four, I like the story. I really do. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I already did kind of talk about it, but I do like this movie's story. It feels kind of original for a Gamera movie, even though, again, it's like a mix of the Showa series and the Heisei series. I feel like this movie still is not very original, but it still feels similar in its own right. So overall, I like this movie's story. I just wish this movie got a sequel. Pro number five is there's some decent monster action in this movie. There's not a whole lot of it, which some may say is a bit of an issue, but I think the monster action here is fun. Zetus' first rampage is well executed. I'm not going to get into the effects just yet, but it's entertaining to watch. And when he chomps down on all those people, it certainly does come out of nowhere, and it's surprising, but it's not in the appalling way. It's just, wow, I did not expect to see that. And hold on one sec. And Zetus's second fight or second rampage is also very well executed. Uh, it's not that long because it quickly transitions into Zetus's second fight with Gamera. But still, for what it is entertaining. Let's see. Okay, so now I have 8 pros. Excuse me, I had to add another one. Pro number 6 is the monster fights in this movie they're okay. I've seen better, to be 100% honest. But I've also seen way worse. Like, this is no Gamera versus Zigra or Gamera versus Virus. But the monster fights here, they're okay. They're very tooth and nail. There's a big lack of energy abilities because the only time a monster shoots an energy blast is actually when Gamera defeats Zetus both times. The first time is when Gamera breathes fire into Zetus's face. The second time is when Gamera shoots a massive fireball at Zetus and destroys him. So the fighting here is very tooth and nail, which Gamera has always been good at, quote unquote, but that's been Gamera's forte, him being more of a close quarters combatant. So it's well executed here. Though my only real issue is that the fights do kind of lack a certain energy to them. They're just, this is a monster movie. We have to have monster fights. So it just kind of seems like not necessarily there was no effort put into them. It's just there was no heart put into them. So that's why I think the monster fights are just okay. They're not terrible, but I've seen way better. So pro number 7 is Gamera himself. I actually like this version of Gamera. A lot of people say that he looks too cute. And, look at that. Look at that design. That is very, very, very cutesy. A lot of people like to shit on the Guardian of the Universe design, which I kind of do, but I don't. It's a good design. But a lot of people say that the Guardian of the Universe design looks way too cutesy. And I had to disagree. I mean, look at that design right there. That is cutesy. I've always said that this design of Gamera makes him look like a kaiju version of Michelangelo from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Come on, that's totally Michelangelo. Cannot deny that is totally a kaiju version of Michelangelo right there. Hashtag kaiju Michelangelo, if you want to do that. And yes, I do think he's cuter than Minya. Showa Minya, that is. But I like this design of Gamera. And also, a lot of people really hate the fact that Gamera doesn't have his classic roar. Yeah, that's another thing about this movie that's kind of infamous, because rights issues did also kind of affect this movie because, well, Kadokawa owns the rights to Gamera and Gauss and also Daimajin. And I also guess kind of Guiron, because they do like make an homage to Gamera, or not Gamera, to Guiron, where the baby Gamera is flying throughout Mr. Aizawa's shop, and he drops a butcher's knife, which of course looks like Guiron's head, and it falls in front of the baby, in front of baby Gamera, and he breathes fire at it, and Mr. Aizawa finds it, and it's like scorched, like 90% of the blade is scorched. So that's an obvious homage to Guiron. But Kadokawa does not own the rights to Gamera's roar. Toho does. And in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in 1991, you can hear the Godzillasaurus utter Gamera's roar when he's being shot down by the U.S. Army, or U.S. Navy, U.S. military. But Kadokawa does not own the Gamera roar. So for this movie, they use the stock dinosaur roar that they used for King Kong 76. A lot of people don't mind. A lot of people don't like the fact they do. I personally don't mind it. I think it fits just fine. It's a little strange in some areas, I will admit, especially with this cutesy design. But I expected Gamera to have this roar, so maybe I was just kind of jaded to it. So I don't really mind. I don't really mind that Gamera has Kong 76's roar in this film. I think it fits. So yeah, I really like my only minor issue with Gamera in this movie is that I kind of wish he used his fire breath a little more. There's one scene where he scorches the knife. There's another scene where he defeats Zetus for the first time, and then there's the second scene where he shoots a fireball. He's very lackluster in his energy abilities, which you'd think would be very effective in keeping Zetus at bay, but he doesn't. But whatever. It's not a huge issue. And pro number 8 is this. Oh my God, are the special effects in this movie really fucking good? The miniature sets are very, very, very well made, very well constructed. They look awesome when they get destroyed, and they're shot pitch perfectly to scale with Gamera and Zetus. You totally buy them as being real. You totally buy them as them being real cities with real monsters walking around in them. The explosions look great. The suit effects are amazing. The animatronic sets are really, really, really good. Or in the sets, the animatronic effects, excuse me, are really, really good. The only, well, I'm going to get to that when I get to the cons. Hang on. But, you know, I don't have much to say about the special. Oh, the Zetus himself, the suit, I mean, as a monster, I'll get to that when I get to the cons, but the Zetus suit looks really, really, really good. It's very well constructed. It's seamless, perfectly seamless. It's well detailed. It's very scaly, but it's also kind of he's both a marine reptile, but also a land reptile. The mouth animatronics are really good. I don't really care for his roar that much. It sounds pretty subdued, but the Zeta suit itself is very well constructed, and the Gamera suit used this Gamera design. I don't mind it. I actually do like it. It's fitting for this kind of Gamera, and also the Gamera design that they used in the opening scene, the tortoise Gamera as Gamera, or not as Gamera, the tortoise Gamera as Bill calls it. He hates it. I like it. I don't mind the tortoise Gamera look. I think it looks pretty badass. So yeah, the special effects are really fucking good. And dare I say, I think they're better than the Heisei series. Almost better than Gamera, or they're slightly better than Gamera 2, but the effects in this movie are top fucking notch. Except for one aspect, but I'll get to that in just a minute. So with that being said, all these good things I have to say about Gamera the Brave, are there any cons? Yes, there is. There's 4. One isn't really a huge one, so I guess you could say it's kind of 3.5. Con number 1 is Zetus himself. Zetus is about as generic a monster as you can get. Almost as generic as Virus or Jiger. Actually, no, I'd probably have to say Zetus is more generic than Jiger, but almost as generic as Virus. Virus is the most generic monster in the entire Gamera series, but Zetus is a very close second. I like his design. I like that he's like a demonic T-Rex. And he also comes off as being a bit of a Berrigan imitation because he has a very long, extendable tongue, and he has big frills going down his back. And he also kind of comes another aspect that, or not aspect. I feel like Zetus also has a bit of a Jurassic Park feel to him because not only does he look like a giant demonic T-Rex, he has a Dilophosaurus frill around his you can see in this screen cap right here that he has like a Dilophosaurus frill around his neck. Actually, you can see it flop down right here on his neck. But personality wise, like he's he's just a hungry monster looking for food, kind of like Gamera in the first movie. But and he has no personality. We don't even know where the fuck he comes from. He just poof out of nowhere appears. Oh, there's got to be another giant monster in this movie. So here's Zetus. There's no origin for him. We don't even know where he came from. All we know is that he comes from the sea, an homage to Gojira, of course. But um, Zetus is as generic can get. He's designed well, and the effects done on him are very, very, very solid. But overall, Zetus is a pretty generic monster, and in my opinion, is the second most bland Gamera monster. And I hate to say that because I do like this movie, but still, yeah. Con number 2. This is the one that's kind of very minor. Is that I think this movie is a little too short. It's only 96 minutes long. And as Omega Pictures said, I wish they used Berrigan instead of Zetus. Give Berrigan an updated redesign. But if they just kept that the same, we still would have asked, well, where the fuck does he come from? But then again, you could say, well, maybe this does solidify the fact that this movie takes place in the Showa continuity, and you just could say, well, another opal from the Valley of Rainbows hatched and somehow is exposed to the same infrared radiation. Whatever, you could explain something, but still, I do wish that Zetus was Berrigan again, but whatever. But yeah, I think this movie is a little too short. It's 96 minutes long, an hour and 36 minutes. I would have preferred if it was like an hour and 45 minutes so you could get just a little more monster action. But I don't mind it nearly as much, it being as short as it is. I mean, I think Gamera Guardian of the Universe suffers from being too short a lot more than this. So it's not that bad, but it is still something that stuck out to me. Con number 2 is that this movie's music score is very generic, except for the final song that they play on the end credits. But aside from that, the score for this movie is just nah. It doesn't necessarily sound like monster movie music. It just sounds like family movie music, which granted, this is a family film, but still, I wanted a little bit more out of this music. Gamera, they don't reuse one or two of Kawatane's themes from the Heisei series. Thankfully, we don't get the annoying Showa Gamera song, which would have drove me insane if they used it here. But still, the music score for this movie is not that great. And finally, con number 4 is that the CGI, once again, in this movie is pretty bad. I've seen worse CG, and thankfully, they decided not to use very much of it. But when Baby Gamera is flying around, of course it's CG. And it doesn't look horrendous, but it obviously looks like CG. The beam effects are okay. They look a bit cartoonish, but they still look fine. And there's probably the worst CG effect in this movie. I think it's CG, is when Zetus is approaching Japan for the second time. There's like an aerial shot of the Japanese bay, and you can see like this still image of Zetus swimming underwater, and it looks really bad. I almost thought that it wasn't moving, but then you could see Zetus's tail like undulating like a crocodile, but it's kind of easy to miss unless you're not really paying attention. And that's probably the worst special effect in this movie. And also when Zetus first flips up his frill, they use CG and it looks really bad. They could easily use animatronics, a very simple animatronic, to flip that up, but they didn't, and in my opinion, it looks pretty bad. So thankfully, they don't use much CG in this movie, but when they do, there's a couple shots here and there where the CG looks passable, but for the most part, the CG looks pretty terrible. Not quite as bad as Gamera 2, much as I love that movie. It's just nah. Or the CG there looks really bad. So thankfully, yeah, it doesn't look as bad as Gamera 2, but I'd say it looks about as bad as Guardian, though thankfully the composite shots here are so good. I was very impressed. Like probably the best composite shot in the whole movie is, oh yeah, the UCG on Zetus's tongue too. That's where it looks acceptable. But again, I've seen better. But probably the best composite shot in this movie is when Gamera was flung into the building when Toru finally has the big red rock and throws it in Gamera's mouth. There's a seamless composite shot of Gamera's head right here, and then there's Toto right here. And it's clearly a composite shot, but it is very well executed. Looks very seamless. Well done, Kadokawa. You did a very good job. And overall, I think they did an overall very good job with this movie. Is it one of the greatest monster movies ever made? No, not at all. But I would say it's far from the worst monster movie ever made. I've seen way worse. I sat through Gamera Super Monster. Excuse me. So overall, with my final rating on Gamera the Brave, I'm going to give this an 8.5 out of 10. I think it's a very underrated monster movie. I think in general, it's a very underrated kaiju movie. It's very enjoyable. It's very well done. It's very well made. And if you have like a little kid around, like if you're a father or you're babysitting one of your siblings and you want to throw this on, I think the kids will just love the crap out of this movie. I think anybody can love the crap out of this movie. And like I said at the beginning, I've never heard anybody outright say that they hate this movie. But I've never heard anybody say that they love this movie. I guess I could be the first to say that. I do like this movie. I think it's very underrated. And it's a damn shame this movie never got a sequel. It's never been confirmed as to why this movie never got a sequel, although I have a couple theories. One, this movie wasn't as successful as Kadokawa was hoping it would be, which is probably the most plausible theory. And Kadokawa just has no immediate desire to make another installment. B, it was too much of a rights issue to get the movie made, and Kadokawa doesn't want to go through that again. Or C, they just wanted to do a one and done Gamera movie, then just make money off the license from people buying Gamera Blu-rays. Which in that case, Kadokawa, you're a bunch of dickheads if you're doing that. It's been 12 years, for Christ's sake. Give us another Gamera movie, please. So with that being said, this concludes the Gamera franchise review. I had a lot of fun doing it. With today's movie, I got the opportunity to see a movie I never saw before and be pleasantly surprised. So with that being said, post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Thank you to all my guest stars who showed up on this series. I'm sure they had a lot of fun, though I'm sure KPF didn't have fun watching Gamera Super Monster, though I'm sure he also had fun ripping the movie a new asshole, so I guess you could say that's a trade-off. So, yeah, post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share this video with your friends. Look forward to my ranking of the Gamera series and then a certain little franchise that I am going to be reviewing involving a certain Austrian actor. That kind of gives it away, but just bear with me. And as always, go out and find a red rock, raise a baby turtle, and raise him into the next giant badass turtle. And I will see you guys in the next review.